And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman and Senator McCain, it is true that as chairman I am not in charge of troops, but I've commanded 3 ships, a carrier battle group, and 2 fleets. And I was most recently a service chief myself. For more than 40 years, I've made decisions that affected and even risked the lives of young men and women. You do not have to agree with me on this issue, but don't think for one moment that I haven't carefully considered the impact of the advice I give on those who will have to live with the decisions that that advice informs. I would not recommend repeal of this law if I did not believe in my soul that it was the right thing to do for our military, for our nation, and for our collective honor.
Admiral Mullen, the second objection that we hear over and over and over is that we cannot implement this kind of change in the midst of a war. And I thought you made an excellent point that the opposite may be true, that wartime facilitates change in some ways. And in fact, wasn't President Truman's 1948 order to integrate our forces actually fully implemented during the Korean War?
It was. Actually, it was implemented throughout that. I don't think fully until 1953. I also have no expectation that challenges to our national security are going to diminish in the near future, such that a more convenient time will appear. And I find the argument that war is not the time to change to be antithetical with our own experience since 2001. War does not stifle change, it demands it. It does not make change harder, it facilitates it.
That 44% of service members who've been deployed to a combat environment since September 11th of 2001 said that effectiveness in a field environment or out to sea would be affected negatively or very negatively by repeal. And I guess my question has to do with the risk level that you attach to that. It seems the risk level is very low for repeal when you have 44% of the troops who've been deployed into combat who said it would have a negative or very negative effect. And I guess the follow-up question to that is, are you saying that you're willing to accept the negative impact this policy change could cause to nearly half of our combat troops when we're fighting 2 wars?
Senator, it is, as all of this is, a pretty complex issue. We did see, as you cite, that was a very much concerning figure to us. But a subsequent question to that says, under intense combat, what would your sense be? And we saw the negative rates drop quite dramatically. As with many of the other experiences and responses to the survey, when we asked the question, have you served in combat, or are you serving in combat with someone in your unit who you know or believe to be gay, the unit performance is rated very, very highly, and the matter of a gay member being in the unit is assessed as having only a minimal impact, in most cases no impact, on the unit's performance.
Is there anything additionally you can shed in terms of your understanding, whether it's anybody, General Ham or Admiral Mullen as well, as to why the participation still was only at 20% and not, excuse me, not higher?
Senator, the 28% overall response rate is well within the normal range, the historical range of Department of Defense surveys of military personnel. When we worked with the company which administered the survey, we wanted to make sure that the proportional number of surveys were distributed based on historical response rates by community. Each service, and in fact each community within services have historical response rates, and we tried to account for that in the distribution of the surveys.
What if those 265,000 resign from the military over the next short period of time? What are you going to do?
Very few people can leave immediately, and so people would be around for the rest of their enlistment, for the rest of their contract if they were officers, and our expectation is that, as you've heard from the authors of the report and from Admiral Mullen, that experience, based on the survey itself, experience would dramatically lower those numbers. If I believed that 250,000 people would leave the military immediately if given the opportunity, I would certainly have second thoughts about this, but I don't believe that. I can't think of a single precedent in American history of doing a referendum of the American Armed Forces on a policy issue. Are you going to ask them if they want 15-month tours? You're going to ask them if they want to be part of the surge in Iraq? That's not the way our civilian-led military has ever worked in our entire history. The should question needs to be decided by the Congress or the courts, as far as I'm concerned.
Were you troubled at the answer we might have received if we had simply asked them, in addition to all the other questions that were being asked, do you think the law should be changed? If the service members are so accepting of this, as members of the panel have suggested today, what would have been the harm in giving that information to the body, which you acknowledge in your statement is the ultimate decision-making forum?
I think, in effect, doing a referendum of the service of the members of the armed forces on a policy matter is a very dangerous path.